Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Thursday educational webinar series. I'm Melinda Bikini. I'm the Director of Patient Advocacy with the Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. And today we are lucky to be joined by Jim Palma, who's the Executive Director of the TargetCancer Foundation. Since joining TargetCancer Foundation, he has overseen its growth from a small startup to a nationally recognized foundation supporting comprehensive rare cancer research programs and patient support services. Jim is a member of the Board of Directors of the National Organization for Rare Disorders, NORD, and is founding co-chair of the NORD Rare Cancer Coalition. Jim, welcome. He's going to give us an update on the TRACK program today, and I'm going to turn it over to you for your presentation and introduction.
Great. Well, thank you, Melinda, and thank you everyone for at CCF for having me today. It's a pleasure to come and speak with everybody about the TRACK study and to kind of walk through what we're doing in this study, but also ways that people can participate if they're interested. So as Melinda said, I'm Jim Palma. I'm the Executive Director of TargetCancer Foundation. And on the webinar with me today is my associate, Carrie Lynn Tompkins, who is a research manager, newly hired at TargetCancer Foundation, but actually has been with us for quite a while in a different role working on this study. So Carrie Lynn, I'll let you say hello as well.
Hi, pleasure to be here today. Thank you so much for having us. Yes, so I am the research manager, doing a lot of all of the intake and the day-to-day that goes along with the TRACK study. So a lot of patient interaction and making sure that things try to run as smoothly as we can.
Great. Thanks, Carrie Lynn. So I'll be walking through a bunch of slides related to this study, but afterward, of course, we're happy to answer any questions that people have, both myself and Carrie Lynn, after we've had a chance to talk about TRACK. So I'm just going to bring up my slides quickly. Okay, so first, I'm just going to go through a quick agenda of what will be a part of my presentation. So what I wanted to do first was just give some very quick background on TargetCancer Foundation and our connection to the cholangiocarcinoma community, walk through the study itself and how it works, some of the inclusion and exclusion criteria, have you meet the team who's running the study, and then kind of take you through a step-by-step of how enrollment and engagement with the study works, and then of course have time for Q&A. So pictured here is my brother-in-law, Paul Poth, who is the founder of TargetCancer Foundation. And Paul was diagnosed with cholangiocarcinoma when he was 37 years old. This was back in 2008. And at that time, when Paul was diagnosed, he encountered many of the challenges that so many people with rare cancers and certainly cholangiocarcinoma face. Certainly that of surprise and not being familiar with that. Really, we had never heard of this type of cancer. But also the surprise of being in a place like Boston at an institution like MGH and learning that treatment opportunities were limited because it was a rare cancer. So Paul started the foundation himself, really in an effort to create a mechanism to drive research into different rare cancers, including cholangiocarcinoma, and really try to change the landscape. Paul passed away in 2009, but since then, his family continued the foundation, and for the past 12 years, we've really been working to continue funding research into rare cancers in many different ways. Sometimes that's grant funding, sometimes it's scientific meetings, and as you'll hear in a moment, our newest program is a clinical trial. So, of course, through our founding, through our family experience, our personal experience, we've had a long connection to the cholangiocarcinoma community. I'm sure there's many people on the call that we know. We do work with many people giving informal guidance and really focusing our efforts on funding research. So we've given over $1 million to cholangiocarcinoma research over the past 11 years, really with a focus on basic research tools, the foundational elements of a research program that we hoped would help to spur something bigger. We've been really grateful to be a part of that work. And also been really grateful over the years to have such good friends and partners at Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation. We've all known each other now since certainly the earliest days of TargetCancer. And we really feel fortunate. We always say, it's very, very lucky to have partnerships with other groups doing similar work. It really makes us all stronger, and it's something I'm very grateful for. So as I mentioned, we historically funded basic research. But basic research, is researchers in a lab. It's incredibly important. It takes a long time though. And what we were really interested in doing was trying to find ways that we could drive rare cancer research forward, but at the same time, deliver impact to patients facing rare cancers today. We wanted to reach both of those goals at the same time. So very, very long story short, we developed a clinical trial, which we hope can really meet both of those goals. So TRACK, which stands for Target Rare Cancer Knowledge, is a clinical trial which is enrolling 400 patients with rare cancers and cancer of unknown primary. And just to get a little more specific, it's 400 patients total, 200 with any rare cancer, 100 patients with cholangiocarcinoma, and 100 patients with cancer of unknown primary. So it was very important to us to make sure that we had a dedicated cohort within this study for patients with cholangiocarcinoma. And of course, there's a personal reason for that. It's something we really care about. But at the same time, as I'm sure everybody on this call knows, because of the great educational programs that CCF provides, there are a lot of opportunities for targeted treatments in cholangiocarcinoma, really uniquely so among rare cancers. So the importance of testing and the importance of precision medicine, there's no better example of that than cholangiocarcinoma. And we hope to really help everybody to understand, what mutations are driving their cancer and then take action on that. So what I'd like to do now is just take a few minutes to describe what the goals and objectives of TRACK are. And maybe if I just step back for a moment, TRACK is a clinical trial, like I said, and typically clinical trials are testing an experimental drug or a drug that is not yet approved by the FDA. This is a slightly different type of trial. This is more of an observational trial. So we're not testing a new drug that isn't yet approved. What we're doing is we're helping to sort of generate data and do it within the parameters of a research study so that we can both provide data back to patients who are participating, but at the same time use that data to drive research forward later. So by participating in a clinical trial like TRACK, it's actually something that can be done in parallel with current treatment, other clinical trials. It doesn't have to be done instead of any of those other things. So I just wanted to point out that distinction from the beginning, and happy to answer any questions on that as we go along. And by the way, Melinda, please feel free to stop me at any moment if there's anything you'd like for me to expand on as well. TRACK has a few elements that we hope help to impact the direct patient experience, and then a few elements that we hope to later inform the broader research community. So one of the most important elements of the study is that it's a remote study. So different from other clinical trials where you might travel to a trial site to participate, this is fully remote, which means that from really any place in the US, people can enroll in this study and use an electronic consenting process to do so, meaning that you can do so from your home. There's no need to go to a medical institution or a doctor to do it. Consenting and enrollment can fully happen remotely and from home. What that also helps us to do is reach people in different parts of the country where maybe it's a little harder to participate in clinical trials, especially if you're not geographically close to an MD Anderson or a Dana-Farber or those types of institutions that typically host trials. In addition, I want to make sure I mention that enrollment is really patient-driven. So, of course, any decision made regarding treatments hopefully is happening in collaboration with your physician. But really, this is enrolling in this study is something that the first steps are taken by a patient who is interested in participating, rather than waiting or working directly with a physician to start that process. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that works a bit later on. So I am very confident that anybody who is on this webinar has learned, or anybody who has talked to Melinda has learned about biomarker testing. And I should have changed this slide to say biomarker testing instead of comprehensive genomic profiling, but same thing, different terms. So I'm very confident that everybody here is aware of the importance of biomarker testing, in my opinion, in any type of cancer, but especially in cholangiocarcinoma. We also know that there are a lot of barriers to this testing, whether it's cost or access or anything else that might appear. The second element of this study is that after enrollment, we're helping to facilitate biomarker testing of tissue and blood through our partnership with Foundation Medicine, and that's done at no cost to the participating patient. So there's no billing involved. It's something that's contained within this study, so that process happens separately. When the tissue and blood testing is completed, the reports are returned back to the treating physician and participating patient. The third element of this that was really important to us is once these reports come back, how do we best utilize them? And anybody on the webinar who's received a Foundation report knows that they're scientific reports, and there's quite a bit of information on there, some of which might be very familiar based on research people may have done, into molecular drivers of cholangiocarcinoma, but also a lot of information that's difficult to interpret. And that's true not only of patients receiving the report, it's also true of doctors receiving the report. There's a lot of information out there to keep up with. There's a lot of relevant clinical trials. And what we wanted to do was make sure that we helped create a way that when those reports come through, they could be interpreted in a meaningful scientific way. So we put together a group called a Molecular Tumor Board, which is a group of about 10 physicians and scientists from across the US who meet virtually every week. And they look at the Foundation Medicine tissue and blood reports along with an individual patient's medical history, have an in-depth discussion about that patient, and then from there provide recommendations for on-label, off-label, or clinical trials back to the patient and their treating physician. An important thing to note is that these are just recommendations. So when we provide, when the Molecular Tumor Board provides recommendations, they are just that. And it really, at that point, is up to the participating patient and their doctor to decide if they want to follow those recommendations and incorporate them in any way or not. At the same time, like I said, we're trying to drive some research forward here. We want to make sure that we're getting a better understanding of the relevance of biomarker testing in rare cancers, but also create genomic data about cancers that often are overlooked by the research community. So after these first steps, after the recommendations are provided by the Molecular Tumor Board, we work with patients for the next year. We keep in touch, and we may request medical records again multiple times to see how things may have changed over that time period. Based on those changes, we may also repeat the Foundation Medicine blood testing 2 or 3 times, and that can happen in connection to a number of different things. So that could be if someone starts a new treatment, or if they achieve partial remission, or if their cancer progresses. We want to then do the test again to see if something has changed, and if so, we'll reconvene that Molecular Tumor Board and then provide new recommendations based on those changes. And last but not least, of course, we're getting a lot of genomic data here, like I said, about rare cancers that often are overlooked. And when the trial is completed, we'll be able to aggregate all that information and share it with the research community. So for those of you learning about the study for the first time, I guess these won't seem like enhancements. For those of you who know, who maybe are more familiar with it, I wanted to make sure I pointed out a few things that have changed since we started the study, which is constantly changing, really in reaction to things that we're hearing from the community who's participating. So our Molecular Tumor Board now has incorporated a genetic counselor. We do not provide genetic testing in this study. We're providing genomic testing. But the genetic counselor is able to give their perspective on the results that we're seeing in the Foundation tests, and maybe make recommendations for particular patients to pursue genetic testing. In addition, when we make treatment recommendations, we know that it can be incredibly difficult to acquire the drugs that we're recommending. And that might be because insurance denies or for other reasons, or insurance denies coverage. So we do have a medical acquisition specialist whose role in the study is to work directly with patients to appeal to insurance companies for approval and reimbursement, especially for off-label drugs. And if that's denied, to work directly with the drug companies to receive the treatments under compassionate use. This individual is incredibly skilled at this and really does a great job in making sure that people can get the treatments that they want. And last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, we do the Foundation Medicine blood testing quite often in this study. And in the early days of the study, that would require somebody to go to their treating institution to get a blood draw or to a Quest to get one. Certainly COVID made this a little more difficult, but in a general sense, we could see that it was becoming a bit of a burden. So we partnered with an outside company who does mobile phlebotomy, meaning that now we're able to send a phlebotomist directly to an enrolled patient's home to take blood there rather than asking a patient to go somewhere else to get that taken. And we've seen that that's been very helpful. So this is a very, I know this is a pretty dense slide, but some key information here that I know will probably drive a lot of questions. So this is the inclusion criteria for the study. And when we developed this study, we tried hard to make the inclusion criteria as sort of broad and inclusive as possible. We really wanted to cast a wide net and not make it difficult to enroll in the study. That being said, there are some elements that we did have to put in here. So obviously, this is a Cholangiocarcinoma Foundation webinar. So like I said, we have 100, there's a cohort of 100 patients with cholangiocarcinoma in the study. So the inclusion criteria around type of cancer, I think, is covered there. The bold line there that's very important, though, is that there's sort of two ways that someone might enter the study regarding their tissue. And we know that tissue is sometimes limited and can be very difficult to get once it's been exhausted, and we're very conscious of that. So when a patient enrolls in this study, we do need to make sure that there is tissue available for the Foundation Medicine tissue testing. So the requirement is that there is ample tissue that's been taken by biopsy within 18 months of enrollment in the study. So if somebody had tissue that was, say, 3 years old, unfortunately, that would not qualify for entering the study. One thing we were able to do, though, to try to ease this requirement slightly is that if your tissue is exhausted, but you've had a previous Foundation Medicine tissue test within the past 18 months, you can enter the study with that test. So we wouldn't run a new test, we would use the existing one, but that would suffice for entering into the study. Melinda, I know that that's a bit confusing. Anything there I can just better clarify?
No, I think you said that well. So you're either looking for tissue that's already available that they can send in for testing, or they can have a new biopsy to get the testing done and enter into the trial that way, or they can use the results if they don't have tissue available from a previous testing that they've had through Foundation One.
Yep, as long as it's within the past 18 months.
18 months, got it.
Yep. So thank you. So those are the primary inclusion criteria. I think the other things that are there are fairly standard across clinical trials. And I would just mention that this is a US only trial at this time. And certainly exclusion criteria, I think, are also fairly limited and fairly standard. The only other thing I would mention, and unfortunately, this is a study for people 18 years or older at this point as well. We hope someday we can move outside the US and look at younger populations, but today this is 18 and over. So I talked a little bit about the virtual molecular tumor board, and I wanted to just make sure I actually told you who was a part of that group, because it is a really amazing group of people, and it's good to know who the people would be who would be making these recommendations. So that team is led by Dr. Rizal Kurzrock, who was previously at the University of California, San Diego, is now at the Medical College of Wisconsin, where she started a rare tumor clinic. And she's really been a leader in research into precision medicine generally, but also especially in rare tumors. Same with Vivek Sabaya, who's been very, very prolific in publishing around molecular drivers of cancer, including cholangiocarcinoma, and same with Dr. Shumei Kato. One of the other people I did want to just point out is Julia Elvin from Foundation Medicine. So she's a lead pathologist at Foundation Medicine, and her presence on the molecular tumor board is really important because as a part of that organization, she's able to really shed a lot of light on both the actual tissue samples or blood samples that led to her report, and also provide a lot of context because she knows their testing system so intimately that I think can really inform the discussion in a unique way. So her role on the molecular tumor board is really, really critical. And this is just a picture of the group. You know, it's just a regular old Zoom meeting, but it's really a fascinating meeting with just some amazing people who just devote a truly incredible amount of time to each patient that they're discussing to make sure that they're coming up with the most comprehensive, robust recommendations possible. And just quickly, this is the study team. And as you can see on the left, there's many of us here at TargetCancer who work to operate this study every day. We do that in collaboration with our academic investigators and with Foundation Medicine, who performs the testing. So I'm going to pause for a moment. The next part of this, I want to just walk through exactly how the process works to enroll in this study. But I know that was a lot of information. So Melinda, I don't know if there's any questions you have, or if you want to do some Q&A now, or better to go through this and then just do all the Q&A at the end.
Yeah, well, I invite people to put questions in the Q&A box or in the chat as they come to you, and we can get to them whenever. There's a couple questions if you want to start on that, and then we probably should finish the presentation and come back to the Q&A. But okay, there'll be plenty of time for answers at the end, but everyone go ahead and start putting your questions in the Q&A box or the chat box. Okay. Someone wants to know the cost of the study.
There's no cost to participate in the study.
Is this a full-time study funded, or the doctors doing this part-time?
So the doctors, or all the investigators, have joined this as a research initiative of their own. So they all have their own, full-time responsibilities, but they give a tremendous amount of time to this study every week, which we're, incredibly grateful for.
Okay, and then just clarifying that we can't use other testing company results, just Foundation One results.
Yep, that's a great question, and I should have clarified that. So in order to enter into the study, somebody has to have Foundation testing results. That being said, once someone is enrolled in the study, if they have other testing results, say Tempus or Caris or their individual institution's genomic testing report, we'll absolutely take that and use it in the discussion with the virtual molecular tumor board as just better data. So while somebody needs a Foundation report to enroll, we'll gather all of that other information and it'll be used in the discussion.
Okay, a couple other ones that I think are related to what you've already talked about. In the cholangiocarcinoma cohort, how many of the 100 spots remain open?
So we've enrolled, I think, Carrie Lynn, correct me if I'm wrong, probably we're getting close to half of those spots.
Correct. Last check we were at almost, I believe it was exactly half.
Okay.
Okay, and then just a clarification on the inclusion aspect of the study. If someone has two cancers, bladder cancer and cholangiocarcinoma, would they be excluded?
That's a great question too. And that really comes down to the discretion of our PIs. There is an exclusion criteria, and that's probably what that person is asking about. That does mention concurrent cancers as an exclusion, but it is something that if somebody was interested in enrolling, we would take to our PIs and ask them for their opinion on if that person would qualify. So, sorry for the a bit of a non-answer, but it's something we would certainly pursue and let them decide.
So case by case, and so reach out anyway. Yes,
absolutely.
Okay, Jim, I'm going to hold on those because there's more questions coming in. I'm going to let you finish, and then we'll see if you answer any of those as you go through this.
Okay, so the next couple slides are taken directly from our website, and I'll post the link to that at the end. So, as we go through this, you can always go back to our website and see these as well. But I want to just walk through the process of how this all works for enrolling in the study. So basically, After somebody learns about TRACK, if they're interested, they would have an introductory phone call with Carrie Lynn, who's on the line, or Mary Oster, our clinical operations manager, who's not here today. But one of those two people would have an introductory call to talk about the study, talk about eligibility, all of the things we've been discussing so far. And if at that point that patient seems like they meet the eligibility criteria, and if they're interested, the TRACK team would initiate an electronic consenting process. And basically what that means is you would get a link in your email. By clicking on the link, you're taken to an electronic consent just through a website. You're able to read that consent at your leisure. There's no time frame on it. And if you're ready to move forward, just electronically sign the consent by clicking on a few boxes within there. And we work with an outside company to do that so that it's fully regulatory compliant. So after the consenting, the consenting process can be quick. One place where there can be a delay in this process is step 2. So as soon as somebody consents to the study, Carrie Lynn and other members of the TRACK team will then start the work of requesting medical records. So it's important that we get a full access to medical records to both further evaluate eligibility for enrollment, but also to start to create a medical history that we'll present to the virtual molecular tumor board. So we work directly with a treating institution to get medical records, gather those, analyze them. And once we've had a chance to do that, we present it to our PIs to get final approval on enrollment into the study. So there's sort of the consent is the first step. After consent, we get medical records, and then that will clarify enrollment. And it is possible that after consent, once we get the medical records, there may be elements in there that could exclude somebody from the study. So just important to note that consenting is the first step, but that doesn't necessarily guarantee entrance into the study, although of course we're doing everything we can to hopefully do so. If a medical institution doesn't respond to us, this can slow things down. We can't move forward until we have these records. And for many of you on the call, I'm sure you're familiar with the process taking a long time. People can help with this. I know many people in the cholangiocarcinoma community are working with Citizen. So that is one way that sometimes things can be sort of speeded up if you have access to your own records. In other cases, people sometimes will send them to us themselves. Our ideal is that we're getting them directly from the institution because it's really important that we do so. And we'll probably still do that to confirm, but there are some ways that we can work together with patients to speed things up. Although we never expect that it's any patient's responsibility to do so. So once enrollment happens, if we get the records, if everything, we get approval from our PIs, then someone is formally enrolled in the study. And the next step that we're doing as quickly as possible is securing a tissue sample to send for testing as well as blood. So the way that works is, again, Carrie Lynn, who as you can tell does a lot of stuff on this study, will work with the treating institution's pathology office and send them a Foundation Medicine kit with materials directly specific to the TRACK study. She'll send that kit to the pathology lab and work with them to make sure that they send an appropriate tissue sample to Foundation Medicine for testing. At the same time, our TRACK team, again, maybe Carrie Lynn or another member of the team, will send a blood kit directly to the patient. And the patient can then take that blood kit to their doctor for their next blood draw, or work with us to set up mobile phlebotomy and get that blood draw taken from home. That blood kit then gets put into a self-posted, self-addressed envelope and sent to Foundation Medicine as well. So again, this is a step where for the tissue samples, we're relying on the pathology lab to respond. If they don't respond, this can represent a delay in the study as well in moving forward. However, if we send a blood kit and that blood kit is sent back quickly, which typically they are sent back a bit more quickly, when we get that report, we'll do a first virtual molecular tumor board meeting with just the blood report, just to make sure we're getting things moving as quickly as possible. We'll even provide recommendations on that, and then we'll repeat the process when the tissue comes in. So we hope we can always do them all at once, but if we can't, we'll do the blood first just to make sure that we're moving as quickly as we possibly can. So like I said earlier, when those Foundation Medicine reports come back, we then put them together with medical history that we've extracted, and we present the entire thing to our virtual molecular tumor board at our weekly meeting, which actually today is going to be held in about an hour and a half. So it's every Thursday at 4 o'clock. We meet with that group, and we present the patients, each individual patient, to that group at that meeting. And in that meeting, typically we're talking about anywhere from 2 to 4 or 5 patients in one meeting. So these are very in-depth discussions, very scientific and really fascinating. And that's really the key step. When that meeting is over, we generate a report from the meeting, which then gets passed through several layers of review, and that report is then sent directly to the patient and directly to the patient's treating physician. And last but not least, that step then starts about a year of follow-up. And during that time, you'll hear from Carrie Lynn, who will check in at some set time points, but also in reaction to other changes that may have happened in treatment during that time. And some of those changes may trigger a repeat blood draw and repeat Foundation Medicine blood test, which then may also drive a new molecular tumor board meeting and new recommendations. So that process, like I said, happens about over the course of the year. Carrie Lynn or someone else on the team checks in, but some people also will proactively reach out to us to say, you know what, I've started a new treatment. I think, you know, it's time for us to sort of re-engage. So we'll request new medical records, a new blood draw, go through the whole process again to send out potentially new recommendations. I'm sorry. And that's really the process. Again, I know that's a lot of information. Carrie Lynn, anything you would add to that?
Nope, there's nothing. You covered it pretty well. So no, I can't think of anything that you missed.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the basically the 4 steps, you know, of participating in this study. 4 steps that could take, you know, at least a year, probably more like a year and a few months, or even a year and a half, depending on how long those initial steps take. So I'll stop there and happy to, you know, really spend the remaining time answering questions.
That sounds good. We've got several that have come in. Let me look here. Okay, so just to clarify the tissue and results in the last 18 months. So the only way to qualify is with tissue, new tissue being sent, or tissue that has been frozen within the last 18 months,
yep,
or a report that's been produced from Foundation One within the last 18 months.
Yes. And,
okay.
And yeah, technically it would be a report on tissue that had been taken within the past 18 months. So the report date is a little less important. It's really the tissue that the report was generated from was taken by biopsy within 18 months.
Okay.
Or surgery.
Okay, so Foundation One may already have my tissue tested from a previous study done in 2020. Can they retest that tissue to make it current?
They likely would not retest tissue that's already received a test. We would just get access to that report and use it as for enrollment into the study. And we would get that. Typically, it's a part of the medical record. So when we gather medical records, we would have the report from there.
Okay. And then the difference in the blood biopsy and tissue. Does blood biopsy count as a comprehensive genomic profile? Seems like you need tissue, but you're using them in conjunction. You would like to have both, correct?
Yes. So we'll always have tissue. Tissue is 100% required. And then the blood is, you know, increasing in its sort of relevance in analyzing cancer. And in fact, the blood assay that Foundation uses is FDA approved. So, you know, we do use them in conjunction, and it is very interesting, you know, as a study team to see both the similarities and differences that can exist between a blood and tissue report. It's possible that we could do more than one tissue test in a study. Typically, there would just be one at enrollment, but then possibly several blood tests after that.
Okay. So my genomic testing was completed September 2021. I have the report. Is that all you need? You would take the report to get it started, but if there was tissue still, you would use that tissue again, correct?
Yeah, and I think that actually could be a decision that's made, in conjunction with someone who's interested, that if they had a report that was within the 18 months, but they also had new tissue, I think for the sake of being as fast as possible, we would use that existing report. But if somebody really wanted to have a new one generated, we could do so to start the study that way, as long as tissue was available.
Okay. Is there any exclusion criteria to the cancer being metastatic?
No.
No.
What type of report is presented to participants, and can they share this with their medical team? Also, do reports continue through the trial period?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I wish what I need to do is create a good sort of fake report to show what this looks like. Of course, all the reports we have, we're not able to share. But it's a report that is a fairly scientific report. In a lot of ways, it's really intended for conversation between a patient and their doctor. It lists the treatment recommendations, but then it also provides more in-depth scientific discussion and rationale about why those decisions were made, the treatment recommendations, why they were made. It also includes copies of all of the genomic testing, the patient medical history, and then academic publication references to back up all of that information. So they're pretty comprehensive reports that are received or generated from each week's meeting.
And are you tracking the patients who are actually taking one of those suggestions from the board and utilizing? So you'll get to see what's being used.
Yep.
And then I guess my next question is are you having the interactions with the physicians to discuss the reports?
So that's a really good question. We invite the treating physician to each molecular tumor board meeting, and we always hope that they'll attend because they can really speak to the patient's medical history, and also because they can hear from the molecular tumor board and maybe have a good discussion and a better understanding of what they're recommending. I will say it's really hard to get doctors to attend these meetings. Doctors are very busy. I know Carolyn tries every week, and we don't always have that attendance. We also offer our PIs will speak to physicians. So if they receive those treatment recommendation report, they have an opportunity to talk to our VMTB members after the fact if they'd like to as well.
That's awesome. Okay, so will treatments discussed on the molecular tumor board report include all other available procedures such as radiology, not just chemo or drugs?
Typically, no. And really so the focus of this study is matching patients to molecularly matched treatments. So trying to match treatments based on individual patient genomic reports. So that's really what the types of recommendations. Now that might include targeted therapies, it might include immunotherapy. And in some cases, it's possible that it could include more traditional therapies, but that's very uncommon. Really, the purpose of this study is to really pursue precision medicine as a way of treating rare cancers rather than traditional means. However, if a patient is currently on chemotherapy or radiation and is doing well, the board won't necessarily say stop doing that. They may offer recommendations for a different point in a patient's treatment or something like that.
Okay. How long do you retain the tissue that has been sent to you? So you guys don't retain the tissue, and I would imagine Foundation One uses the tissue, right?
They do, yes. So the tissue never comes to TargetCancer. It's sent directly to Foundation Medicine.
And I don't ever recall them having or storing the tissue. They typically use the sample that's sent to them, correct? There's usually not tissue that's saved.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
And Carolyn, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, good. I was just going to say there's also situations where if for some reason Foundation Medicine does not use the tissue sent to them for whatever, there's various reasons, they will send that back to the institution they got it from, because they understand how important tissue is and how you're going to need that and you want it to stay where it originated from. So.
Oh, that's good to hear too.
Yeah.
Okay, I was told insurance isn't paying for both blood gene testing and the tissue report, so I only have the tissue report. Could I still participate?
Absolutely. So we would then use that existing tissue report, as long as it's within the 18-month time frame for enrollment into the study. And then we would do the blood testing through the study after the patient enrolls.
Okay. Yeah, so if someone, anything over 18 months is going to exclude them from participating in the trial, correct? It has to be 18 months or newer.
Yes,
so unfortunately, right. There was a 20-month and a 22-month question, but it has to be 18 months.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to, for study purposes, to really stick to those timeframes. It is still worth a call, I think, to make sure. Sometimes, just making sure that the time frame is exactly right, for somebody. But there's always an opportunity for a phone call there to discuss, and ultimately, it is up to our PI's discretion to see if something. We wouldn't want to say that just because if it's 18 months in a week that person is excluded from the study. There may be some flexibility there.
Okay. And again, will you repeat the cancers that the TRACK study is covering?
Sure. So it's all rare cancers, and we define, for the purposes of this study, we defined rare cancers as incidence of 6 per 100,000 people per year in the US. So that's about 20,000 patients per year, or 20,000 cases per year. Solid tumors and lymphomas. So we're not looking at blood cancers in the study, really just solid tumors, 6 per 100,000, cholangiocarcinoma, and cancer of unknown primary.
Okay. There's a couple questions about how to get started. I don't know if you can. One was on the website and can't find the button to click. So maybe if you guys could give them specific directions on where to go to first.
Yes, and that's, I forgot to bring up my last slide, but that, people can directly email either Mary, Carrie Lynn, or both. They can also call the number there, and you can learn more on the website, but really the best way to directly get in touch with someone is through email or phone.
Wonderful. And somebody has said that it's been an excellent experience, and so they encourage others to participate.
Oh, that's great to hear. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, I'll leave it open for any more questions here in the next few minutes if you have them. Anything else, Carrie Lynn or Jim, that you can think of we should talk about or let them know?
No, nothing I can. Again, Jim has really encouraged as well, but it's always worth a check-in with us. Just again, we may have other questions we can ask you that get a little more information out that might show that you do qualify. So.
Right. So yeah, always reach out just to make sure that, reach out to you. Don't take no for an answer, find out for sure. I always tell people it never hurts to make a phone call. So make that phone call and find out. And no, this is not for breast cancer, only for rare cancers, cholangiocarcinoma and cancer of unknown primary.
That's right.
Okay. One question I did want to ask was, I don't know if you said it, is there an average time frame from the time that the records and tissue and blood is collected to the time the report comes out?
That's a really good question. Carrie Lynn, what would your estimate be on that?
I don't know that I could give an average, but we have in the last 8 to 10 months, we have definitely fixed that process quite a bit. I want to say fixed it, but sort of streamlined it much better. So I would say for the most part, when you're looking from first consent to first MTB, first molecular tumor board meeting, typically we're looking at about 2 months right now. There have been some that have gone through as quickly as 3 weeks, if everything is in line and works perfectly. And there are others that we unfortunately do have to wait several months for, again, just depending on when we can get medical records and access to the tissue and get that report. But ideally, we're looking to get a patient through, and then within 2 months would be like the perfect time frame, I think, for the most part, if everything goes fairly smoothly.
So this would be an ideal program for somebody who has started a treatment and is looking for next steps, so they can be planning ahead.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's I mean, obviously, right at the outset from diagnosis, it can be helpful. But there is that time frame, and we always want to be, very, very candid about that. That there could be a wait there. So I think when people do start treatment, and then our are following, the type of advice that I know you give, Melinda, to really think ahead and have a roadmap, then that's a perfect time to do this. There isn't that immediate urgency. So if there is a delay in tissue acquisition or medical records, it's less burdensome.
Okay, perfect. And again, it's US only, so sorry for our Canadian folks, yes?
Yeah, I'm sorry. And we do get that question a lot. The initial phase of this study, this is our first study like this. So it was really important to us to make sure that we could get it up and running and optimized in the ways that Carrie Lynn just said to move as quickly as possible. Now that we have this in place, we can start to turn our sights to other places, and certainly Canada is a place that we'd love to expand to. So hopefully soon.
Wonderful. And yes, will there be a TCF-002 coming?
I hope so. That's the goal. We want to do more of this, and we're grateful for the response we've had and the support we've had from our partners like CCF. So we do want to do more and pursue these types of studies in the future.
Wonderful. Okay, I think we got all the questions. There's a couple people that are going to be reaching out to you, Carrie Lynn. So I'm sure that you'll be hearing from several that have watched today and others who will watch over the next couple of weeks of the recording. This is being recorded and it will be housed on the CCF YouTube channel. So if you want to share it or rewatch it, please feel free to do so. And thank you guys so very much for taking the time to go over the study and answer our questions. And don't hesitate to give Mary, Carrie Lynn a call and ask the questions that you have to them. They're happy to answer. Wait, a couple more questions came in. Let me just see real quick. Okay, nope, we got it. Just everyone saying thank you.
Well, thank you all. And it occurred to me on this slide, I didn't put my own contact information on there. So you can see it's Mary at TargetCancerFoundation.org. I'm Jim at TargetCancerFoundation.org. So please, anyone, feel free. Mary and Carrie Lynn are the experts on getting started in the study, but I'm always happy to talk about that or anything else. So please feel free to reach out to me as well.
Yes, and I'm always happy to connect you to them as well if you have any questions. And thank you guys again. We're looking forward to you guys getting some more patients signed up so that they can get this report.
Great. Well, thank you again for having us.
Yes. Have a wonderful week. Take care, everyone.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.